This is Tess Tucker reading from my original Daughter of a Dead Woman, and here we kick off with the Return of the Jedi era. There are still some weaker points, but we're getting better here, and in my opinion, Endor is when things start to go on point, and I don't cringe as much reading it. There are still some points in the revelation of who Tess is that I find could be explained a little bit less cheesier. But it's still really good, and we're seeing some development in the character, so that's great. Without further ado, Daughter of a Dead Woman, Chapter 23, Tatooine, 4 ABY. Ben Kenobi's home. "15-year-old Tess Naberrie stared into absolute darkness, feeling the cold, heavy lightsaber in her hands. She pivoted to the left, after sensing a need to do so, then second-guessed herself and twisted to the right just in time to block a blast from a hovering laser remote. "You said the Force can obey your commands," Tess pondered, "but Master Yoda said that it controls your actions. Which is it?" "Both," Luke clarified. Tess's question had distracted her, and the laser remote doled out its punishment on her arm. "Ow! I thought I saw where it was," Tess explained, disabling the blue-green lightsaber that took her a month to construct. She gave herself a moment to catch her breath. The laser remote had her running all about the room, and she was exhausted. "What do you expect I would say to that?" Luke asked her. "Your eyes can deceive you," she recited. "Don't trust them." "Stretch out with your feelings," Luke added. Tess looked over at her secret master. In just 1 year, Luke Skywalker had aged significantly. While boarding an Imperial vessel a few months ago, he was infected with a lethal disease called Crimson Forever. He was cured after some serious dirty work on Leia, Lando, and Tess's part, but the disease had taken with it Luke's youthful glow. He now looked more like a man than a boy, a Jedi Knight. Tess's training had remained a secret to both Leia and Chewbacca for a standard year now. Since his best friend's pre-carbon freezing wish was that Chewie look after Leia and Tess, and with Luke looking after the latter, the Wookiee became just as loyal to the Alderaanian princess as he was to Han. Chewie therefore could not be trusted with the truth. Lando Calrissian, on the other hand, had walked in on a floating plate several months ago, and Luke and Tess were forced to explain. There was never a dull moment on the Falcon these days. For a while they had a new companion working with them, even if just for the money. He was a smuggler and an exceptional pilot named Dash Rendar, and an old friend of Han's. Leia had managed the funds that convinced him to find out where the carbon-frozen Han had been taken. Unfortunately, he had been killed in the explosion of a timely escape from the Black Sun. From droid impersonations of rebel finance ministers, to visiting a Master Yoda on the Dagobah system, to investigations of Imperial activity, to shuttle crashes, to creepy, unattractive species lusting after Leia, to the monthly vengeful death plots, Tess could honestly say she never got bored. Leia seemed to wrap herself up in Imperial business until Dash found out where Han had been taken. She was good at it, too. Anyone who didn't know her would not suspect for a moment that the man she loved was nowhere to be found. However, those who really knew her could see that many of her rebellion efforts had connections to finding Han, so Leia distanced herself from them. It made Luke and Tess's training easier, that was for sure. Luke had even taken Tess to the Dagobah system to see Master Yoda twice. For the longest time, the little green Jedi Master did not seem to think much of Luke while training him. Understandably, when Luke brought Tess and revealed his intentions of training her, Yoda found the idea absurd. But when Luke demonstrated his training techniques, Yoda saw potential. "Train yourself as you train your Padawan," the green creature had told him. "As Obi-Wan trained you, and soon a powerful Jedi you both shall be." Somehow, Luke understood the Force better while training Tess than he did while enduring his own training. But once he realized that, he quickly improved himself a great deal, quickly impressing the 3-foot Jedi Master. Luke still visited Yoda to continue his training, and as of now he was considered a Jedi Knight. Tess continued her training with Luke whenever he came back. As far as training went, the fact that there were no known Force sensitives besides the Giving Company and Yoda did not give Tess much to compare to. Tess excelled in Force persuasion to the point that she successfully convinced Chewbacca and Dash that they had seen nothing when they witnessed her constructing her lightsaber. She had the Jedi Code memorized by heart and was getting better with the laser remote every day. Still, after what they had run into with the Empire before, Tess wanted to be able to defend herself. She saw what the Force was capable of when she ripped the jaw off Admiral Chid Deltrod. She did not want to do that again, of course, but Tess wished she could harness control of a more light-sided form of that power. Considering the Empire's ever-increasing interest in her, part of her felt like her current training was fighting fire with ice. The latest trip to the Dagobah system had left Luke more distant than usual. Tess longed to ask him about it, but their relationship when training was far different than their relationship in the cockpit of the Falcon. There, she could ask Luke anything. Here, Luke was master. Her thoughts bothering her, Tess removed her blast helmet and patted down the top of her long single braid. She smoothed out her dark blue tunic, which could not help its dust collection on a planet like Tatooine. "Something troubling you?" the amazingly observant Jedi Knight asked. Luke handed Tess some water and motioned for her to sit down. Tess took the water gratefully and sat down, catching her breath. "Not much," she told him vaguely. Then she made up her mind to be honest. "You just seem different since you returned from training with Master Yoda, that's all." Luke gave her a look. Tess immediately regretted saying it. "You worry about furthering your own training, Tess," he said gently, "and calming your mind. I sense you've been slacking on your meditation." "We thought we had a lead on finding Han," Tess defended. "With Leia and Chewie trying to bargain with that sexually frustrated Prince Zizor, and you on the Dagobah system, Lando needed help flying the Falcon." In her self-defense, Tess had forgotten her more polite Padawan self. "Sometimes I fear you think this is just a game," Luke sighed. "That Master and Padawan are little roles we play to entertain ourselves." "Of course not, Master," Tess insisted, though admittedly sometimes she did feel that way. She half expected both of them to break character one moment and just burst into laughter. "Then I insist you—" Suddenly Luke was cut off. Tess sensed it too. Quickly, Luke grabbed the blast helmet out of Tess's hands and placed it on his own head, stuffed her lightsaber in one of the deeper pockets of his robe, and whipped out his own lightsaber. Tess fell to the floor and positioned herself lying on her stomach with her feet in the air and her chin in her hands. By the time Leia Organa entered the late Ben Kenobi's old house, she saw nothing but a Jedi practicing his Force reflexes while an observant Tess sat on the floor to watch. Luke expertly deflected each laser blast from the remote with his lightsaber while simultaneously expressing a helmet-muffled greeting to Leia. Performance mode engaged, Tess turned to Leia with a smile. "He got hit twice," she blurted. "If he gets hit again, he owes me 10 credits. "Luke," Leia said seriously. Something about her tone was important. Luke heard it too. He pulled himself away from his Force concentration so fast that he got hit by the laser remote again. 10 credits! Tess exclaimed triumphantly, still in character. "What is it?" Luke asked the princess. Both the Jedi Knight and his secret Padawan neared her. "We're one step closer," she said with tentative relief, as if she was afraid to be too hopeful. "Lando conned his way into the Hutt Guardsmen's Guild. It won't be long until we can make our move." "Don't worry," Luke assured Leia. "Han is as good as rescued." Chapter 24. Leia Organa could not stop the fluttering of nerves in her stomach if the galaxy depended on it. After so many false leads and failed attempts at catching up to Han, this one felt like they really had a chance. The princess looked down at her disguise. No one doubted that she was Boushh Theobi's bounty hunter on the Black Sun, and she hoped no one would doubt it now either. In reality, Boushh was presumed dead, but hardly anyone knew that. As a member of the rebellion, Leia had concocted scheme after scheme to aid the Republic effort, but this was one of the most thought-out plans she had been involved in. Lando Calrissian was already at Jabba's palace on Tatooine, having been accepted into the Hutt Guardsmen's Guild under the alias Tamtel Screech. Leia had her Boushh costume ready to go, and even brushed up on Ubi's, which she already spoke a little of. Luke had fashioned a Padawan's robe from some of Ben's old clothes and constructed another lightsaber so Tess could believably disguise herself as his apprentice. There was something unnerving about being in the former bedroom of a dead man, though Leia never believed in ghosts. Luke once alluded that Ben Kenobi still contacted him through the Force. Maybe that allowed for the ghost-like presence that the Alderaanian princess felt. Leia's disguise smelled just as horribly as when it was given to her. She would have washed it, but she assumed the lingering Ubi's smell would make her costume more believable. Leia struggled with one of the belts around the thick brown tunic before she heard a knock outside the room. She swiveled to face Luke. "Perfect timing," Leia told him with a smirk. She turned her back to give him access to the stubborn belt. "Can you help me with this?" Luke nodded accommodatingly and entered the room to help her. He fastened the belt with ease, then took Leia gently by the shoulders. The princess sensed some unease from him. "What's wrong?" Leia asked him. Luke exhaled generously. His gaze fell to the little blue droid rolling in beside him. Master Yoda, Luke began nervously. Did you know that he knew your father? Bail Organa, I mean. Everyone always felt like they had to clarify who they meant with the term father when you were adopted, Leia had observed over the years. She scanned Luke's face. Leia was not expecting such a serious tone from him. It took her a moment to answer his question. Yes, Leia recalled. They worked together in the years before the full rise of the Empire. Luke nodded. Master Yoda received a message from your father years ago, soon after your adoption. Yoda gave me a permission to take the message through R2 so that I could show it to you. Leia's eyes widened like saucers. Her father? She did not allow herself to think about him most of the time. She missed him so much. It concerns Tess, Luke added, turning to leave the room. I'll keep her out of hearing distance. At that, Luke Skywalker left Leia alone with the droid. As much as Leia hated to taint her idealistic image of her late father, after finding out about Tess, the secret child, Leia had so many questions. Would this message answer them? There was only one way to find out. Play the message, R2. The little droid immediately beeped a response, and a blue hollow projection emerged from his tiny frame. The blue fog was too static to make out a face at first, but moments later Leia recognized that the projected image was indeed her father. The hollow-projected Bail Organa cleared his throat, a sentimentally familiar sound to his daughter. Jedi Master Yoda, Organa began, I trust you have arrived safely at your destination. It has taken me several standard days to bring myself to create this message, so I assumed the most effective attack would be to come out and say it. I have done something shameful. Following the adoption of my daughter Leia, I became overwhelmed with a fear for her safety, knowing where she came from. Though I take complete responsibility, this fear brought me to the medical wing, where I thought I would solve all my problems. I ordered for the creation of a child. It sounds insane as I state the words. They created the child that I asked for, another biological daughter of Padme Naberrie. I created a decoy for my Leia. I returned to the medical center months later with regret towards the decision, but I had to check on the status of the child. She was supposed to have been fully developed by then, using chemical processes similar to Camino cloning methods. But the experimental procedure failed, and her artificial womb growth was instead slowed. Though the child would grow normally once she reached full term, she was no longer a possible decoy for my daughter. I took this as a time for me to redeem myself. The child I speak of will be named Tess Naberrie. And in 7 years, when she grows to full term in the provided artificial womb, I will take full responsibility for the care of this child. I understand, Master Yoda, that this was a mistake. I know it complicates things. However, I will die before Tess knows that. I realize now that I've done nothing but put the children in more danger. They were separated for a reason, and adding a third to the mix just increases their chances of detection. I found it necessary that you be informed of this change in the developments. I sincerely apologize for going against the original plan that you, Obi-Wan, and I worked so carefully to unfold. And again, take this message as my acceptance of responsibility for the creation of Tess Naberrie, and my willingness to take care of this child not just as the half-sister of my child, but as if she were my own daughter. The blue hollow projection flashed off. Leia just sat there, frozen, staring at the empty space where it used to be. Chapter 25. Her thick black cloak heavy around her, Tess spun to her right towards her unseen assailant. "Where do I go, Master?" she called out. "Towards the one you must destroy," hissed a dark voice, old and decrepit, with a chill in each syllable. "How will I know?" Tess asked the Master. She could feel the frustration of not being able to see her attacker rise. "Show yourself!" she demanded of him. As if in response, 3 figures in cloaks appeared in front of her, all bowing their heads so that their hoods covered each face. One cloak was white, one blue, and the other black. Suddenly all 3 heads looked up, but their faces seemed blurry. They all spoke at once. Tess couldn't tell who was saying what. It was unclear whether the voices even came from these figures at all. They were at least 3 at first, then they exploded into uncountable numbers, all muffled with screams of terror shouting over them. believe this child to be the biological daughter of my Leia.
Sister.
Anakin,
You're breaking my heart!
That boy was our last hope.
Obi-Wan, how old is she?
There's still...
Don't you touch her!
There is a
Strike me down with it.
mind to do. Adding a third to the mix just
Domination.
increases their
No!
chance to the children.
Tess, give in to your anger.
She will be loved with
So
scientific experiments.
Abomination!
Now you will experience the full power of the dark side.
No!
Tess screamed, bolting upright in her bed. In doing so, she slammed her head into Luke's. "Ow!" Luke exclaimed. He rubbed his temple. Tess gasped in shock. "I'm sorry!" she exclaimed. That was some dream," Luke muttered, sitting at the end of the bed. "You're sweating bullets." Tess looked down at her sand-colored tunic. You couldn't see from the outside of the thick material, but on the inside she was soaked with gross sweat. Her wavy hair was matted against her head, neck, and cheeks. Luke left momentarily and returned with a wet cloth for Tess's forehead. He let her catch her breath. "Do you want to talk about it?" he asked softly. Tess shook her head. "Just some nightmare," she returned nonchalantly. "I don't even remember it anymore." Tess wiped off her face and brought herself to a stand. "Any word from Leia?" "She's made it to Jabba's palace," Luke updated her. "She's seen Han." "She has?" the girl exclaimed excitedly. She could have jumped up and down with joy. Almost a year of searching, and never had they been so close to saving their friend. "Don't let yourself expect too much," Luke cautioned, even with success so near in sight. Tess shook off his warning. This was good news. She wasn't about to let her secret master be a downer. Leia would most definitely succeed, and they would be off this planet with Han by morning. Chapter 26. Luke and Tess held their breath as they listened to the sound device attached to Leia's disguise. It was designed so that they could hear everything going on around her, but could not communicate with her. However, Luke and Tess were regretting the use of that particular device because it was so incredibly frustrating not being able to remind Leia that they were still listening for updates. She seemed to forget they could hear her at all, so the Jedi Knight and his secret Padawan were left in the dark. After nearly 2 standard hours of complete silence, Luke rose to his feet to make something for dinner. As if Leia was just waiting for them to get distracted before she did something interesting, Tess suddenly heard a beeping sound coming through the gadget. "Luke, wait!" Tess halted, picking up the contraption so she could listen more closely. Luke leapt back over to the small table in the late Ben Kenobi's sitting room so he could listen as well. "What is it? Did she say something?" Luke asked anxiously. Tess hushed him just in time for them to hear a loud, metallic thump. Tess and Luke exchanged worried glances. A gap of silence over the device seemed to last an eternity. Then there was a dull, humming sound. "Is that it?" Tess wondered aloud, though she realized a moment later that Luke knew no more about the sounds of carbon unfreezing than she did. Proving her hypothesis true, Luke shrugged. The two of them listened even more carefully, so carefully that when Leia's altered voice came through, they nearly jumped out of their skins. "Just relax for a moment," Leia began through the voice distorter. Tess and Luke shared the initial thought that the princess was speaking to them. Logic kicked in moments later. "You're free of the carbonate." Tess and Luke could have leapt in the air with joy. "We did it!" Tess squealed, clapping her hands together. She was too relieved to be disappointed that they wouldn't be carrying out the backup plan she and Luke had concocted. Unlike his Padawan learner, Luke resisted such hasty assumptions. He kept listening through the hearing device. It was a good thing he did, because a deep, hut laugh flipped their plans upside down. "No!" Tess gasped. She returned quickly to the table. Neither she nor Luke spoke Huttese, so they had to guess what Jabba was saying based on Leia's responses. "We have powerful friends," Leia muttered, clearly trying to maintain her diplomatic composure. "You're going to regret this." A few more words in Huttese, and then Luke and Tess nearly lost their lunch at the sloshing sound that could only be described as a wet, sloppy lick from a hut. They heard the muffled rummaging of Leia getting carried off somewhere before the hearing device went static. Tess and Luke slowly raised their eyes to look at each other. "Well," Luke decided, Looks like you'll get to be my Padawan learner in public after all. He stood up, strangely composed as would be expected of a Jedi. Get your things. We're going to Jabba's palace.